Okay, so hopefully you realize that what you're going for here is a couple of substrings, right? You have this string, Bob, pipe, bar, and you want to break it down into two substrings. You want to get this substring and this substring. So if you imagine the indexes of these places, you have 0, 1, 2. You want to get the substring from 0 to 2, which is 0, comma 3 in the substring command. And then you want to get the other substring that's bar. But in order to figure out where do I start and where do I end, it takes a little bit of effort. You first have to get the index of where this pipe is. So you do an index of to figure out where this is, which in this case it would be 0, 1, 2, 3. And then you get a substring from 0 to 3, and then you get a substring from 4 to the end. You'd have to do a little work in here to get that to work. But you could use substring and you could use index of to get both of those words. But let me show you a little tool to make this even easier. There's this cool little method that we haven't talked about before. I'll leave that there. I'm going to write it right here. Paste it in here. And it's called split. And what split does is it actually you say whatever the string is that you want to split. So in this case it's the string line that contains that. And I want to split it, and you enter in the actual symbol or character that you want to split it on. So every time it comes across one of these bars, it says I'm going to split all these things into multiple substrings. Okay, so I found a bar there, so I'm going to split this and this. If I had more things with more bars, it would split them out into more different pieces, okay, or tokens they're called. So in this case, since there's only two things on the side of this bar, it's going to split this into two different things, Bob and bar. And you can hopefully, by looking at this, see what that gets stored into. Takes that line, splits it everywhere where there's a bar, and then it puts the resulting little pieces, the little tokens or substrings, into an array of strings. So that's what this is. So I called it words. So it's basically breaking it into individual words. Okay, so it put that into that array. So on this particular case, it would end up with an array of size 2 because it's got the word Bob and the word bar inside of this array. So now, what would I need to do if I've got an array that has two values? Kind of recreate this here. Okay, it's got Bob followed by bar in the array. So this is at index 0. This is at index 1. How would I actually now say, okay, I want to get the username is the first thing in the array, and the password is the second thing in the array, and the array is named words. So how would I do that? I would just say that the username is words at 0, or words 0, and the password is words 1. Okay? So that's a nice tool to use when you have something like this where you just want to split something on a particular character. Okay, this is common when you store things like this, where you want to store a bunch of things on one line and use some particular character bit to basically say where one thing ends and another thing begins. Okay, so you can use that split tool if you want, that split method. If you didn't want to do that, you could always use index of and substring, and you could do the same thing. It's just a little bit more work. So now that we have our username and password, okay, we need to check to see if whatever the username and password is for that particular line, so in this case we're reading in Bob and bar, we need to now check to see if the entered username and entered password match that. So hopefully you would be able to do this by now, or you can say, okay, if the username that just was read from the file, dot equals, we have to do dot equals because it's a string, if that equals the entered username, and we want to check to see if the passwords are equal as well, and pwd dot equals entered password. Okay, if that's true, then what do we want to do? Then we know that we actually, the person entered in a valid username and password because it matches one of these lines, okay? And so we would come here and now say that the correct password that we had originally set to false is now true. So that when we get done with this loop and we come down here, it will check to see if correct password is equal to true. And by the way, this is a little shortcut. I could actually write out here if correct password equals true, say you're logged in. Otherwise, else, say you're invalid. If I just say if correct password, okay, that automatically, only if this is true, does this line happen. So it does the same thing. So either way, correct password, you could just say if correct password, or you could say if correct password equals true. I'll go ahead and do that just to make it more explicit. So that's what we want to do here. Since we found a valid username and password, we say correct password equals true, so that when we get down here, it'll say you are logged in. And there's one more thing you probably should do, and this is just good advice. Anytime you're looping through something, and you get to a point where you don't need to keep looping anymore, which in this case, we found a valid username and password, so there's no reason to look through the rest of the file. Okay, putting the word break here makes sense, so we don't keep going down through the file. So if you could imagine this file, instead of just having 2 lines, having 2,000 or 200,000 lines or something like that. Okay, and we've gone down partway through the file and we found a valid username and password, there's no reason to keep going. And this is actually an example. This is an example where using the break would be a little bit more important, okay, or fairly important to stop, because reading from a file takes a little bit of time. Okay, it's still fast by human standards, but by computer standards, reading something from the hard drive, so in other words, every time we read a line from the hard drive here, is relatively slow. So we don't want to keep doing over and over and over, reading another line, reading another line, reading another line if we don't have to. So if we can break and stop looping, okay, that's what we want to do. So use the break there. Okay, the program would still work if we didn't have it, but we wouldn't want to keep looping if we didn't need to. Just good practice.